another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics who write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs, and currently I'm teaching entrepreneurship at Vinh University in Hanoi, Vietnam. Tonight's guest is Paul Sloane, author of the book, The Art of Unexpected Solutions, Using Lateral Thinking to Find Breakthroughs. Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Mark.
So, Paul, you are in London, England. Is that where you're located?
Close enough, about 30 miles out, but close enough.
And so let's start with you telling us about your professional background, how you got to where you're at right now.
I studied engineering at Cambridge University. I worked for IBM, first in manufacturing and then in sales, and then became marketing manager. I went through IBM sales training, IBM management training. Then I became a marketing director of a software company in the 1980s, Ashton Tate, who were database leaders at the time. I became managing director, CEO of software companies, VP International for a US software company that was based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then for the past 20 years or so, I've been running my own business, helping organizations improve innovation with workshops and talks. And I've written over 20 books. And the most recent, as you say, coming out in January is The Art of Unexpected Solutions.
Which is what we're talking about today.
Mm.
So, why did you write this book?
Well, I was very interested to see that so many examples of lateral thinking were not deliberate. They happened by chance. They happened through serendipity. They happened because somebody saw something unusual and then reacted in a curious, positive, investigative way, rather than it saying, this is something unusual, it's annoying, let's disregard it, let's move on. And I wanted to analyze that and look at whether you could set up the conditions in which serendipity would favor you in life, in which you'd have better luck, better chance, better encounters, better unexpected events, which can then lead to beneficial outcomes. And I analyzed that and started writing it. I thought I'm never going to be able to write enough for a book. And in the end, I've got a pretty good book on it, I think. And I started out thinking it's all about business. But in fact, many of the examples are to do with personal lives and sport and art and literature and warfare and all sorts of other things. And I came to realize that if you look back at your life, you'll find that many of the most interesting things that happened to you, the turning points in your life, were very often the result of something unexpected, a chance event, a chance meeting, something you were made redundant, you were ill, you had to rethink your life for some reason that was unpredictable, and that it's had a dramatic effect, very often a beneficial effect. So the unexpected is very powerful. It shapes our lives in all sorts of ways, at a society level and at an individual level and at a business level.
Yeah, I always tell my students that the only thing you have control over in life is your effort. That's it. Everything
Yeah.
else is totally out of your control, and you learn that uh, as you get older. That's all you have control over, unfortunately. So let's start with you begin by showing why conventional thinking fails. What's the biggest misconception leaders have about problem solving that blocks unexpected solutions?
Well, there's many things, but I think the biggest thing is that what worked in the past will continue to work in the future, and tried and tested methods are what we should rely on because we know what works and we know what doesn't work, and we think we know what customers want and we think we know what customers don't want, and therefore leaders tend to lead looking backwards in terms of looking at the past and how things were, and things are changing so fast now, so rapidly that using the past as a guide is very dangerous, very unreliable. And instead of looking at models and analyses that are based on past history, we should be carrying out experiments all the time to see what's happening now and to try things all the time. So we should be in a constant state of trial and investigation in order to understand how the world is changing and how we can take advantage of it.
How is AI affecting this?
AI is having a dramatic effect everywhere. It's quite remarkable. And I think AI is going to transform the lives of our children and their children dramatically. And I think initially it's going to be very beneficial. I think we're going to see huge changes with AI in terms of work and work practice. It's going to transform medicine. It's going to transform the public sector. It's going to make a lot of things faster and more efficient and more consistent. And at the same time, it's going to be a threat. It's going to threaten employment, and it's going to ultimately, it could turn out to be a threat to mankind because we've created something that's going to be smarter than us. And wherever you find two species that coming to clashing, you find that the smarter one tends to come off better. And where it's leading is something of an unknown at the moment, and it's rather scary. But I think if you're not employing AI at all levels and using it not just to do routine things, this is the amazing thing. You can use it to do creative things as well. And there's a chapter in the book about how you can use AI to foster unexpected solutions, to come up with lateral ideas and brilliant innovations. So AI is not just for routine things; it's also for creative things.
Oh, I think it's the most amazing tool of my entire 64 years on the planet.
Mm.
I'm hosting next weekend, I'm having my 780 students at Vin University have a hackathon on how to develop product services, new companies using AI to create jobs, not reduce jobs, and to focus on how to create more products and services to support AI as well.
Yeah.
So because I said if your generation does not start thinking how to harness AI for job creation, you're going to be in a world of trouble. And so I think it's very important for them to be thinking about that because Bill Gates and Elon Musk and everybody else is just using it right now to eliminate positions and improve profit margins.
Yep.
How do you define lateral thinking in a world where AI algorithms and data increasingly push us toward their linear decisions?
So AI, lateral thinking is a phrase coined by Edward de Bono in contrast to vertical thinking or conventional thinking, where we build block on block on block in a logical, straightforward fashion. Lateral means coming at the problem from the side. And it means instead of looking using conventional assumptions and conventional approaches, we deliberately discard those and try to find a radical approach using a different perspective, a different point of view. And there are some common themes in it: challenging assumptions, asking very basic searching questions, deliberately taking a different point of view, and the use of chance. Those are the four key elements of lateral thinking. And it's more needed than ever before. Lateral thinking is the key that unlocks innovation. And that's why it's so important.
You say assumptions are invisible prisons. What technique works best for helping teams notice the assumptions they don't realize they're making?
Well, this is a great question. I mean, do you know the old story about the two young fish who were swimming along, and an old fish came along and said, "Hi guys, how's the water today?" And one fish turned to the other and said, "What's water?" And of course, the fish don't realize they're in water, and we don't realize we're living in a world where everything about us we assume. And this question, how do you get people to challenge that? It's a real challenge, and I do it in my workshops, and we have to go straight right back to basics. But I mean, let me put this to you. If you'd been working in a taxi company and you'd had a brainstorm, how can we improve service and to our customers? No one would have said, we don't need taxis. No one in the room. They'd all assume that the way to run a taxi firm is with taxis. But Uber is a taxi company that doesn't own a single taxi. And Airbnb is a hotel company that doesn't own a single hotel room. And no one at Hilton or Marriott would have conceived of Airbnb. It's a very lateral approach to the problem for how to provide accommodation. And Uber is a very lateral approach to the problem. How can we provide lifts to people who need lifts? So, and in the same way, if you'd been working for Encyclopedia Britannica in 1990, you'd done a brainstorm and someone has said, well, what if we gave it all away for free online and when we didn't pay anybody and we just had volunteers doing all of it? People would have said, that's a stupid idea. That's ridiculous. People want experts. And nobody would have challenged those fundamental assumptions. So it's a real getting people to recognize they're in water when they're in water and they're making assumptions when they're making assumptions is very difficult. And it needs an outsider who's prepared to get them to think really laterally about how they're doing things and use techniques to get them in a state where they can really ask fundamental, stupid questions about why do we need to own any taxis? Things like that.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting what you just said about Uber and Airbnb. That when Uber was starting, the taxis should have immediately, I mean, they were only in it a year or two before they started to expand, and you would think the taxis would have made adjustments, but almost to this day, they've never made any adjustments.
No, it's really hard. Once you've got a business model that works, it's really hard to challenge that model. And what people tend to do is tinker with it. And Kodak, had a model which was great for film, and their business model was excellent for that. But it didn't lend itself to digital photography, and so they were put out of business. Sometimes the correct answer in capitalism is for companies to go bust. The correct answer is if you've got the business model which is no longer appropriate and you can't change it, then you should go and let somebody with a different and more appropriate business model take over.
Well, the margins in film were almost like 100%. I
Yeah.
heard from people from Kodak, and you can
And
imagine
and of course, digital photography is very hard to make money out of.
yeah, and you can imagine that these guys weren't MBAs, Harvard MBAs, saying, "Oh, come on, let's just stick with this until this horse dies,"
Yes,
and that's what they did because they feel like, well, they'll move on. But if the founder was still at Kodak, they would have made the adjustment. It's
they would have
when
tried
the
something.
yeah, professional management comes in, then that doesn't really happen. Even you worked at IBM. When I was in my 20s and 30s, IBM was a king. Now nobody talks about IBM, even though it's still a successful company.
Well, they had changed, and they changed from a product company to a services company, and they made the transition. A lot of the companies around at the time, the Honeywell and Burroughs and all those, they didn't make that transition. NCR, remember all those big names from the 70s, 80s. So IBM at least adapted. It was a painful process, but they came through it.
But it's funny, everybody used to know the name of the CEO of IBM, like
Yep.
they knew the CEO of Microsoft or any of these or Apple. And now I never hear students saying, "Oh my God, I would love to work for IBM." You
No.
never hear students say that.
No.
Which assumption busting method has produced the most radical breakthroughs in your workshops? And is there any examples you can give?
The most powerful lateral thinking method that I use in my workshops, and people don't believe it until they do it, is the random word exercise. So you start with a challenge, and the challenge might be, how can we recruit the best engineers, or how can we break into the Vietnamese market, or something else. And then you take a word from the dictionary, a noun, at random. You don't choose it. It's the first one you come to. You open the dictionary and the first noun, and then you write it at the top of the flip chart, and then you write some associations with that noun, and that might be literal or lateral. So if the noun is camel, you might say cigarettes, you might say oasis, you might say water storage, you might say desert, you might say all sorts of things, and you write those down. And then you try and force a connection between the challenge, which is how to recruit the best engineers, and this noun. And the people come up with crazy things. Well, we take everyone to an Oasis concert. We give them free cigarettes. So they come up with a whole bunch of ideas anyway. And a lot of them are really, really silly. But as you go through, you find occasionally you get a really, really creative idea because you've started in some place which is completely illogical. It's a bizarre place to start, and therefore, and the brain's very good at finding connections between two very disparate ideas. It can put them together in clever ways, but you've got to start with something which challenges the brain by taking it out of its comfort zone into somewhere very remote. And this is what the random word does. And then you try it, and then once you've run out of it, you go and find another word, and you go through and you never run out of words in the dictionary. And very often it's the common words. It's not obscure abstract nouns like hope or destiny. It's common words like corner or shop or tree or stump or something like that, which often give you the best ideas. But you don't select. If you turn up a really strange word, you just go with it and you see where it leads.
Question from the audience. Marketing myopia is often baked in because it feels safe. How do you convince companies to take the kind of risk you describe? How do you enable folks to step out of conventional thinking when dollars and other resources are at stake?
Well, yeah, it's tough, and it has to start at the top. You need a leader who's prepared to take risks and who is prepared to countenance failure, because taking risks involves failure. It involves trying things that don't work. I advise people to have a budget for experimentation, and most of that budget will be wasted. Most of that budget will go on things that, if everything you try works, you're not being bold enough. They say if every time you throw a dart, you hit the bullseye, you're standing too close to the target. So, you need a leader who's prepared to do that. And many leaders get it. Many leaders realize that if they stand still, they're going to be overtaken. There's a big risk. And the only way to grow and to expand and to cope with what's coming down the pipe towards them in this ever-changing world is to try new things. And then they've got to convince their people to try new things. And many people are risk averse. And many companies have a culture which is risk averse. Stick to what you know, stick to what works. So you have to create an atmosphere of what's now called psychological safety, where people feel safe in coming up with crazy ideas which challenge conventions, which say, why do we need to have hotel rooms if we're in the hotel business? Why do we need taxis if we're in the transportation business? I mean, the people are prepared to come up with these crazy ideas, but you need a leader who's prepared, A, to let people do that, and then B, let people try the best ideas, and when they fail, not blame them. So you try a crazy idea, and very often, as you know, most entrepreneurial ideas don't work. Most new startups fail, and it's not for want of trying. It's because of timing and luck and a whole bunch of things. Unless you try, you never know. And you've got to try. You've got to kiss a lot of frogs to get one prince, and that's what it's like in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I've done 30 startups. I know all the pain. And you just, like you said, there's no way for you to know if something's going to succeed or fail until you've actually put it out there. You know, all the market research in the world,
That's
because
right.
all the big product, especially consumer product companies, have the smartest minds, do all the surveys, everything else, and then they put the product and it still fails after they think that they know that this is going to be a home run. It doesn't turn out to be.
I know, and there are many, many examples of that. You know, Amazon Fire and Google Glass and New Coca-Cola, and all of these were extensively tested. And Segway is a prime example, which was, you know, it was thought to it's going to transform transportation, and it failed. So it's very, very hard. I like Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup, which I'm sure you've read, where he talks about
Everybody loves that book.
yeah, the minimum viable product, where you take the
Yeah.
smallest, crappiest version of your idea and you show it to customers and you say, what do you think of this? Will it work? And then they say, well, we like this, but we don't like this. And the idea is very, very fast feedback. Instead of building the whole thing in secret and then launching it and it flop, what you've got to do is take the smallest version that you can out and test it and then iterate and keep changing. And the things they don't like, you change and you go back, you say, what about this version? And they say, no, he's still not right. And you keep doing that until eventually they say, yes, you've got something.
Yeah, I also tell my students, venture capital people will tell you, ask 100, interview 100 people. I say, don't interview 100 people, interview 25 people who would actually write you a check, give you their credit card, and tell them, I only want to know if this would help you and you would pay for it. Don't tell me you think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Don't encourage me. I don't want to build anything that you really don't want to buy. So if you want to buy it and you're willing to beta test it, I'm willing to do it. But otherwise, I don't want to waste your time because I found that I've done that over the years where you build something because people tell you, oh, I think that sounds like a great idea, and then nobody buys it. So you've
Yep.
really got to get people to step up. What is the one question you've seen consistently unlock insight when everything else fails?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But if there's one question that I think business leaders should ask every so often, and it's very powerful, is this: what business are we in? Why do people buy our product? And why do people not buy our product? And unless you know the answers to those questions, you can't develop new products, you can't improve, you can't market. you can't do anything because you everyone assumes they understand, but very often they don't. You know, the chairman of Black and Decker once famously said, "People don't go into a DIY store because they need our drill. They're going because they need a hole in the wall." Uh,
Right.
and and Wonderbra, who are a very famous brand, in their internal communication to staff, they say this: "We do not sell underwear. We do not sell lingerie. What we sell is self-confidence for women. They're not selling underwear; they're selling self-confidence." And I did this with a group of charities at a workshop once. I had a whole bunch of people from charities, and I asked, and the key thing for charities is bequests. People leave money to them in their wills. And I asked them each to write down why people left money to them in their wills. And lots of people said, kindness and thoughtfulness, and they want to help out and all this. And one woman from a dog's home, a very famous dog's home, the Battersea Dog's Home in London, wrote down a word which absolutely amazed me, and it amazed everyone else in the room. And the question was, why do people leave money and bequests to this dog's home? And the word she wrote down was spite. What she said was, the old woman leaves her money to the dog's home because her children never visited her. And
Right.
it's an amazing thought that if that's one of the main reasons that people, you have to change your marketing, your messaging, all sorts of things. And of course, we all assume that people's motives are good and nice, but sometimes motives are very strange. And unless you understand that, why are people really, what problem do we solve is a similar question. What's the real problem that we solve for our customers? And if you don't understand the problem you solve, you're in trouble. And if it's making women feel more self-confident, that's different from just selling underwear.
Yeah, that's right. Uh, and I think those people have the best insights. Provocation can sound disruptive or even uncomfortable. How can leaders use it effectively without derailing a team?
Well, yeah, and this is a good question. When the leader stands up and says in the meeting, right, anyone can challenge anything. I want you to be provocative and I want you to be controversial. People sort of say yes and they nod, but they don't believe him or her, I should say. They don't believe the leader
Yes.
because up until then, the leader's been pushing them to deliver this month's targets, this quarter's numbers, and to keep focused and do the job. And all of a sudden, the leader says, let's think laterally and come up with the correct. And of course, people can't flip like that. And they're worried about saying something silly and being ridiculed, being laughed at, and they keep quiet. So the way to do it is to go to get a diverse group of people, different departments, different experiences, different skills, take them off site somewhere that isn't in the office and get an external facilitator. And you might say, Paul, you would say that because you're a facilitator. But I can get people to do things and approach things in a ways that the managing director, the CEO can't, because with the best will in the world, they have an image which is very hard to shake in the minds of the people that work for them. But an external facilitator can say, right, I want you to ask very basic questions. And we're going to use some techniques here to displace you out of your comfort zone and get you thinking differently. And the lateral thinking techniques, such as the random word, that's one of them. There are many others. And then in the course of the day, they'll come up with lots and lots. And you have to start with divergent thinking, lots of different ideas. And then you narrow them down and you select the best ones. And then ideally, you invite the CEO to come back at the end of the day and say, look at these great ideas we've had. What do you think of this and this and this? And will you resource it? And the CEO says, yeah, no, we can't do that. It's not part of our strategic mission. We can't do this. Is very interesting. Yes, we should develop this idea and take it further. And that's a really good act of provocation and brainstorming and workshopping that I've done many times.
Um, why does randomness work so reliably as a creativity trigger? And how can people avoid random input and feel forced or artificial?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look back, you'll see so many things happened that were random, that were unexpected. And, the most famous example is the Scottish microbiologist, Alexander Fleming, who went on holiday. And when he came back, he found that his Petri dishes, which he hadn't cleaned before he left, one of them had developed a mold which was resistant to bacteria. And he was smart enough to study it and to examine it. And he realized that he stumbled on something incredible. He stumbled on penicillin by accident, at random. One of the most powerful things that has ever been invented and saved millions of lives now, antibiotics, came about by chance, by random. Pfizer had a new drug that they were testing to help men with heart conditions and blood pressure. And they said, "Is it helping?" The men said, "No, but we'd like to keep using it, please, because the side effects are very beneficial." And they'd stumbled on Viagra. And Viagra was an accident. So many times we see this in business that the random, the things that happen in unexpected, unpredictable ways can be very beneficial, but only if you've got a frame of mind which is prepared to investigate and try it and see what happens, and put some research into it. So my advice is this: when something unusual happens, something crazy, something bizarre, don't get annoyed, get curious. Ask, what can we do about this? And in your business, there's lots of things happening every day. And there's lots of routine things happening, but occasionally something unusual happens, and some customer does something unusual. And if you can observe it and bring it back, it's a promising source of innovation and creative ideas. So Levi's found that people were tearing their jeans, and so they produced ripped jeans. They found that people were sitting in the bath to shrink their jeans or stonewash them. So by observing customers, not every customer, it's not 100%, it's just a handful of customers do crazy things with your idea, with your product, and take it in different places. And what you need to do is those outliers that you need to be observing, not the mass. The average customer is average. But the future is already out there. It's just a handful of customers are in the future, and they're doing things with your product and your ideas and other people's ideas, which you need to observe and harness and develop.
Uh, I have a question from the audience. One of your absolute fans here says, I'm a fan of your work. I have several of your books and online courses. How's your forthcoming book different from anything else you've done?
This is my forthcoming book. It's coming out in January. It's called The Art of Unexpected Solutions. And it has some common themes with earlier books in terms of lateral thinking approaches. But it's examining very much the unexpected, the unpredictable. And what I start out by saying is very often the unpredictable shapes your life. And there's a fallacy, which is that we can control things, we can plan things. We want certainty. We're looking for assurance that the plan we're on is the right plan and we're doing the right things. And the search for certainty and control is misleading. It's a false guide. And instead of searching for certainty and control, we should be searching for ambiguity. We should be exploring ambiguity. We should be exploring the unknown and the random and things that happen along the way. And this book explores that in much more detail than any of my other books. And it's packed with stories. There's many examples in there, and I think you'll enjoy it.
What is the most surprising analogy you've seen help a team solve complex business challenge?
Well, I very often I use a method called similes, where we say my problem is like, and what you come up is, instead of trying to solve the problem, you say, here's a problem we've got in our company. Uh, who else has got a similar problem in a different walk of life? Maybe in the military, in medicine, in the arts, somewhere else. I did it with one company, and the problem was absenteeism. And it was a call center, very high pressure, a lot of young people. And very often the phone in the morning saying, I feel sick, I'm hungover after going out last night, I don't feel like coming in. They just take the day off. That was the problem. And instead of trying to solve the problem, we said, what is this problem like? Who else has got a similar problem? And people said it's like getting your toddler to brush their teeth. It's like, getting someone to wash the dishes. And somebody said, it's like getting the third soccer team to turn out on a Saturday, because the third soccer team, they're not heroes, they're not great, they're not top of the league, they're struggling. And if the goalkeeper doesn't turn out, you're in trouble and you lose the match. And how do you solve that problem? Well, you solve it with peer pressure. You say, we lost this match because you, Joe, didn't turn up. We didn't have a goalkeeper and we let in 7 goals. And so you and then we took that idea across, and instead of giving rewards and incentives, we actually published tables of who was most absent and say, look, by being absent, you're letting down the team, just as though it was the soccer team. So we took an idea from soccer, student soccer, and took it into business. And it's that sort of transformation that you can do if you use that method called similes. Our problem is like somebody else's problem.
And that's worked with some of your clients and any major breakthroughs that have happened from that?
That's me. Well, I'll tell you a major breakthrough that I write about in the book and I speak about, and that's Jorge Odon, who is an Argentinian car mechanic. And this is a great story of lateral thinking, I think. And once evening, a friend of his came over and he gave him a challenge. He said, here's something I bet you can't do, Jorge. If you take an empty wine bottle and you put a cork into it, can you get the cork back out of the bottle?" And O'Don thought about this. He said, I don't know how to do it. And his friend explained how to do it. And he said, you can see a video on YouTube of how to do it. And the way they do it is you take a plastic bag and you push the plastic bag into the bottle, and then you jiggle the cork around until it's just lying in the plastic, not inside the plastic bag, but actually nestled in the plastic. And then you inflate the plastic bag, you blow into it until it grips the cork. And then you can pull the cork out of the bottle in the plastic bag. And Jorge went to bed that night thinking about this. And in the middle of the night, he woke up with a brainwave. And the brainwave was this: getting a baby that's stuck in the mother's birth canal out of the mother is just like getting a cork out of a bottle. It's the same problem. It's a mechanical engineering problem. And he developed a thing called the Odon device, where when the baby's being born, you put a little bit of plastic sleeving in and around the baby's head, and you inflate it slightly, and then you can pull the baby out. And after a lot of difficulty, he got Becton Dickinson to develop this product, and it's now in use all around the world. And it's very simple, inexpensive. People can use it in developing countries. It doesn't need sophisticated techniques. But the point about the story that I like is this: that he approached the problem not from the point of view of a doctor or a nurse or a clinician. He approached the problem from the point of view of a car mechanic. He said this problem is not really a medical problem. Getting the baby out of the birth canal is a mechanical engineering problem. Let's use mechanical engineering principles and a clever solution from somewhere else. And that's what he did. And taking a solution from one area into a completely different area is a prime example of lateral thinking. And that's my favorite example.
What's the most entrenched pattern you've seen in organizations, and how did they break it?
Yeah, well, you see a lot of entrenched patterns, and the worst entrenched pattern, I think, is the boss knows best. And the CEO has got to be CEO by being smart and being dynamic and driving results, and they deliver, and they want people around them who will do what they ask and get on with things. And appointing a team of people who agree with you and support you and are loyal to you is a big mistake, I think. You need a team, in any team, where there's some degree of contention, some degree of disagreement, not outright conflict where they don't get on and fighting, but you want people who are loyal rebels, people who will challenge your thinking and say, hey, boss, I think there might be a better way to do this. And then you need a boss who's prepared to listen and admit they're wrong. And John Adair said this: the most powerful thing a leader can say is, I admit I was wrong. And if you look at the leader of the USA right now, he never says that. He never says I was wrong. And he surrounds himself with people who are very loyal, and he's chosen loyalty over competence. And I think this is a dangerous path to take. And you see it in companies where they've got very strong leaders who are sure of themselves and are taking them down the wrong path, and they push harder and harder and harder instead of saying and having some self-doubt and be prepared to countenance other possibilities. And that's why you need a diverse team with different points of view, and you want people who are aligned with the goal, but they're doubtful about how to get there. They're prepared to challenge. They say, yes, we agree with the overall direction we're headed, but we think there's a better way to get there. And then you've got to be prepared to delegate and let people choose. And if people lower down want a different approach and they really feel strongly about it, prepare to let them try it.
Yeah. He definitely has people telling him whatever he wants to hear. And that's why the America's on the downside.
Hey, be
Um,
careful what you say, Mark. We might get censored.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you even look at surveys, even among the Republicans, has been going down as well. Before, when you see these surveys and it says, it's unfavorable, but who cares about that part of it? What you care about is what his own party thinks. And before he was at like 92, 94%, but he's down into like the 68% um, favorability. And so I think there's going to be hopefully a wake up call and turn this around. In your experience, what reversal exercise most often produces aha moments that shift the team's perspective instantly?
Well, I wish there was one. I wish there was an exercise which shifted people's perspective immediately. I think the best thing is to tell stories. And stories like the one of Jorge Odon or penicillin or Viagra, any of those stories, and there are a lot of stories in this book, the new book, The Art of Unexpected Solutions, which you can use, I think, to inspire people and to get people thinking differently. And stories about unexpected events, random events, unexpected collaborations, these sorts of things. And then you gradually see that it might apply. And I think a great leader has to be a great storyteller. And a really good leader should tell stories about things that worked and things that didn't work. And a really powerful thing for a leader to do is to talk about his or her own career and say, this was a mistake I made when I was early in my, and this is the lesson I learned. And this is something I tried that failed. And another very powerful thing for a leader to do is to praise someone in public for trying something that didn't work and to say, Mark here, he tried this initiative. It didn't work, but we learned a lot of lessons from it. And that's the kind of initiative I want. And people will say, just a minute, the CEO is praising someone for failing. Wow, that's really something unusual. So um, get people thinking differently by telling stories, first of all, and telling stories, about what happened to Kodak and what happened to Segway and what happened to Coca-Cola and what happened to Best Buy and tell stories of failures as well as stories of success and show there's a risk in doing nothing, there's a risk in standing still, and there's a risk in trying things. And I want you to challenge, our thinking. And are we going to be put out of business by a Travis Kalanick who comes up with an Uber in our sector? Because I don't want that to happen. I want us to be thinking about that ahead of those guys. And I need you to be thinking those ways. You're the guys who are close to the customers. You give me your ideas and bring me some brilliant, crazy ideas, and I will praise you for doing so.
Yeah, I kind of think that's why Procter and Gamble is still successful, is because of that.
Yeah.
That they keep coming up with new product ideas all the time, and they're still a company that is revered around the world. Question from the audience, non-corporate question, asking this as a parent of a 16-year-old junior who's generally confused about career choices. Most advice he gets is to list interest of strengths which doesn't seem to help much. If you could give parents one short exercise or experience that reveals how a teenager naturally thinks and solves problems, what would you suggest we watch to know it's working?
Wow. What's an
That's a hard
interesting
one.
question? And I work with youngsters, and very often, I say, do you know what you want to do? And they don't. And I say, don't worry about it. You don't need to. It's not essential for you to have a career mapped out and to think, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, whatever else. Follow what you're interested in. I would advise if you're good at maths and science, then and computer science, that's a really good area to go into. If I was starting again, I would do computer science and maths and start my own company. And because there's so many entrepreneurial opportunities in those sectors, as you know. But if you're really interested in history or languages or social sciences, that's fine. Study what you're interested in. Go to university if you want to go to university, if you're really interested in studying, if you love your subject. Don't go to university because you think it's a job ticket and it's something you ought to do because everyone's expecting you to do that. You should do what you feel is right for you, and just explore the world. And the most important thing I would say to youngsters is this, and it's what every motivational speaker says, though they wrap it up in different words. But when I speak to youngsters, this is the key message I give them. I say, your success in life is determined more by your attitude than by your ability. I say that again because your success in life is determined more by your attitude than by your ability. Ability is important. You're never going to be a great basketball player if you don't have the ability. You're never going to be a great scientist if you don't have ability. But especially in business, attitude is really, really important. And successful people have a can-do attitude. They get up in the morning, they get on with things, and they when they fall over, when something goes wrong, they don't blame other people. They take responsibility. They say, I screwed up, but I can learn from this, and I'm going to be better next time. And unsuccessful people have a not can do attitude. They blame other people. They're always a victim. They blame their parents, their teachers. They didn't get the opportunities. They were unlucky, and life's been unkind to them. And they take it easy and backpedal and they'd go and watch video games and vape and do these things as an escape. But the successful people are prepared to make an effort and change their lives. And I think if you can inculcate in your children a can-do attitude that I can solve problems, I'm in charge of my own life. I am the captain of my soul. And if you can get them thinking that way and say, the opportunities for them are unparalleled. The opportunities for you to have a good life, to travel, to do interesting things, to learn new skills, and to seize opportunities is better than it's ever been before. The challenges are there, but the opportunities are there too. But you've got to be prepared to pick up the ball and run with it. You've got to be prepared to learn new skills and keep working.
The thing I notice most, because I teach young people every day, is they're risk adverse. They're so afraid of failure and what goes along with it from their friends and family, especially their parents and how they look at it. And I remind them all the time that unless someone dies, it's no big deal. And so that failure gets them that much closer to success because they're going to keep learning and getting better and better. But if they don't take any risk, they can't possibly improve their skill set. And
Yeah,
so
well,
even in class, I tell them, if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to call on you, not to embarrass you, but to improve your skill set. So I think to be able to communicate, because today is the most competitive time in history, because you're not only competing against people internationally, but you're competing against the machine. And the only way you can compete against the machine is because you can have abstract thoughts and come up with ideas the machine never can come up with. So you've got to do that. Here's a question from the audience. Are there certain industries, sectors, categories that are more willing to take risks than others?
yeah, loads. And you can see it all over the place. You can see it not just a gender divide, an ethnic divide, a cultural divide. There's loads. So and I'm going to be controversial now and say this: men are more willing to take risks than women, in my experience. And I think there's a lot of evidence for that. And in business, very often it's the man who'll stand up and say something crazy, and a woman might have been thinking on it but didn't want to make a fool of herself. And women have a lot of great qualities, but taking risks is not one of them. And generally, the vast majority of entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs, are men. And there's certain sectors in the question, if you look at high tech, gaming, any of those things, they're full of really creative people. If you look in the public sector, government offices, they tend to be full of risk averse people who are keeping their heads down and doing the same things. And they're reluctant to try new things. And if they try something and it fails, they get blamed. So why try? If you keep your head down, you'll have a job for life, you'll collect your pension. And we need to change that attitude. We need a much more entrepreneurial attitude inside the public sector as well, and also nationalities. I've worked in the Far East, I've worked in America, I've worked in South Africa, and all sorts of places. And I did a workshop in Taiwan for a big company there, and I asked the question, what's inhibiting innovation? What's stopping innovation inside this company? Because they were very bright people, PhDs, really clever people. And the answer they came back with, which surprised me, was we're too deferential to authority. We would not challenge what the senior leader says because it's not in our culture to challenge the top manager. Where our culture is to support the leader and typically his decisions. So And yet you go to, and I've worked in Israel, and Israel's the exact opposite. All people that they all think they've got great ideas, and you give them a set of instructions in a workshop. You say, I want you to do this, then this, and they just ignore that. And they do it, they find their own way to solve the problem, their own way to use the exercise, and off they go. And they're so entrepreneurial and dynamic. Italy is a similar. Italy's full of really creative people who are coming up with crazy ideas. And generally in the US and the UK, you find a lot of creative people too. So it's risk entrepreneurship and being comfortable with risk. It definitely changes depending upon the culture in the organization and in the country.
Yeah, that's why I started the first high school entrepreneurship competition in Asia is to get kids thinking along those lines, which regardless if they develop a company or not. And I have to say, I'll tell you one amazing thing here. Last year, this past June, when I ran the first high school competition, among the top 10 teams, the winning team was a team made up of five students that never met each other.
Mm,
That They went on a social media and they learned about the competition. And one person said, "Hey, I want to enter this competition and I have an idea." And he went on Telegram and he said, "Anybody want to join me?" And four other students from four other high schools in four different parts of Vietnam joined him, and they ended up winning the competition. And the one of the other top 10 teams also built their team, and they worked on it 6 weeks using Zoom, and then they came to Hanoi, and they ended up winning the competition. And I thought that was really unique and super interesting that that happened. Um,
yes.
why, why does play unlock creativity, and how can serious, high pressure workplaces introduce play without feeling childish?
Well, yeah, childish is good. Childlike approach is good, I think. Children ask a lot of questions, and if you've got a little child, they ask hundreds of questions a day. Why, Daddy? Why, Mummy? And you give them an answer, and they say why again. They keep asking why, for the adult, it's quite tedious, but for the child, that's the way they understand the world. And what they're really saying is, your first answer doesn't satisfy me. I need to know more. And at work, we don't do that. We don't ask a lot of why questions. Why are we doing this? Because the boss needs it. And you don't keep asking why. So play encourages you to think differently, and there are many examples in the book of play being used in constructive ways, and people experimenting and trying things, fooling around at work, and especially in the arts and music and literature, people fooling around with different things. They often come up with something new and creative. And if you have a situation where you have some fun and you get people laughing, that it unlocks their creativity and makes them more willing to come up with really crazy ideas. One of the icebreakers I use in my workshops is everyone on the table has to tell a big lie. The very first, and the bigger the whopper it is, the better. And they make some incredible thing about themselves or something else, and everyone laughs. But by doing that, they're unlocking all the inhibitions, which otherwise say, I've got to be serious, I've got to be professional in this meeting because that's my persona at work. And once you start telling big fibs and laughing about it around the table, it just breaks the ice. There's an element of play there, and play just loosens things up and gets people thinking differently. And people are more engaged if they're playful. They're more likely to work as a team. If the team is coming up with a song or a skit or something they have asked them to create that's funny for other people, all sorts of hidden talents come out, and people really enjoy it, and it makes them more engaged in the workplace.
Which story best illustrates the essence of lateral thinking in action?
Well, there's many of them. Uh, Let me tell you this story. So, uh, Edward de Bono tells a story of how Ford Motor Company came to him and they said, Dr. de Bono, can you help us? Uh, Everything we put design into our cars, the competition copy, where we come up with nice rounded bumpers or anti-lock brakes or airbags or anything, and everyone else has something similar. What can we do to get a unique, sustainable competitive advantage for Ford. And they've been thinking about this. And he went away, he came back, he said, I've got the answer for you. They said, what is it? He said, what you should do is you should go to every major town and city in this country, and you should buy a car park in the center of that town or city and make it available for drivers of Ford cars only. And their jaws hit the desk. It was way too radical for them. And they'd been approaching the problem from the point of view of automobile engineers designing, how to get more brake horsepower and how to get better fuel consumption and how to get better comfort in the car. He approached the problem from a completely different point of view, which is a real key element of lateral thinking, is to take a different point of view. He came from the point of view, a little old man or little old woman who wants to go shopping. They're not interested in brake horsepower or fuel consumption. They're interested in whether they can drive through the traffic and park when they get to their destination. Now, if you knew that wherever you drove in your country, there was a car park available for you in the center of that town or city, that would be a powerful reason to buy that brand of car, Ford. So by approaching the problem from a completely different perspective, he was able to come up with a completely different solution, which unfortunately was too radical for him.
You argue that constraints actually expand creativity. What's the most powerful constraint you've ever introduced to a team?
Well, we all operate within constraints, and there are many examples where the constraints that you have you can use, and if you give somebody an unlimited budget, unlimited resources, they'll come up with all sorts of impractical things or over-engineered things. Actually, you want things which are smaller and lighter, and very often you want things which are simpler. So instead of adding more features, we want things to be taken away. We want things to be shortened and found less of. So let me tell you a story. In 1853, a customer went to the Moon's Lake House restaurant in Saratoga Springs, New York. And this customer was very particular. There is rumored to be Cornelius Vanderbilt, the great railroad and shipping magnate. And he ordered a meal with French fries. And when the French fries arrived, he kept sending them back, complaining they were too thick and not crispy enough. And he kept sending them back time after time. And the chef, who was called George Crumb, was really annoyed by this. And so he decided to teach the fussy customer a lesson. And he used the constraints that he had. He sliced the potatoes paper thin, the thinnest he could. He fried them far too much so they were absolutely brittle crisp in hot oil. And for good measure, he doused them in salt. And then he sent them back and said to the customer, try that. And to his amazement, the customer was delighted and said, what have you created here? It's wonderful. And it's what in America they call chips and we in England call crisps. He created a new food by he'd used the constraints of what he had, which was oil and potato, and come up with something new. And out of annoyance, out of trying something over and over again, failed experiments leading to a success. And it's an example of a lateral thing is an example of an unexpected breakthrough. And I think it's one of the stories in the book.
What diversity of thinking, not demographics, matters most when trying to generate breakthrough solutions?
Well, diversity really pays off. If you've got a homogeneous team who all act the same way and think the same way, they'll come up with the same ideas. And there's a very good book called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. And he starts by talking about the CIA. And he said the CIA recruited the very best people from the very best schools, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, and they got the top graduates and they brought them all in and they trained them up. And they all were really great, clever people, but they all thought the same way. And none of them could conceive of the possibility that a man sitting in a cave in Afghanistan could actually attack America and destroy the Twin Towers as he did. And it was just completely out of their range of thinking. And what he's saying is you need diversity. CIA had very few Arabs, very few Muslims, very few Arabic speakers, and they didn't understand the mentality over there. So what you need is a lot of different skills and different ethnicities help, I think, they help people think differently. Different levels of experience. You want old and young. You want experienced and fresh into the company. You want sales and marketing and production and development. You want them all cross section, and then you want a lively facilitator who controls the discussion, doesn't let the loudest people dominate or the most senior people dominate, and then you've got a fertile environment for great ideas. And you need psychological safety where anybody can say anything and challenge. I think there's a better way to do this. I think the company's got it wrong. I think our approach is wrong because I think we should be doing. And here's an idea. Why don't we get rid of taxis and just get people to give lifts to people in their own? What a crazy idea, but listen to it. And you need bosses that are prepared to listen to the ideas that come out. So this is the approach which I would recommend. Diversity, I think the more diverse, the better. And what you want is diversity of ideas, diversity of approach. And very often managers, when they're hiring, they say, we want someone who'll fit in with the team, who'll fit in. We've got a young, dynamic team. We don't want to apply an old person or someone with an entirely different background because they won't fit in. But you don't want a team where everyone fits in. You want a team where there's some contention, where there's some disagreement, where there's some diversity of ideas, because there's a lot of evidence that diverse teams are more creative than homogeneous teams.
What's the most important rule people ignore that turns traditional brainstorming into a waste of time?
Well, early criticism, I think, is being quick to judgment. That won't work. Don't be silly. We tried that last year, and customers won't go for that. So the important thing in the brainstorm is there's two phases. The first phase is divergent thinking, where anybody can say anything and you go off in any direction. And I'm looking for literally hundreds of ideas at that stage, many, many ideas. And then I was reading a book recently where the guy from BBDO, the big advertising agency, said in their brainstorms, they say, go wide and then go narrow, select the best ones, and then go deep, investigate the best ones, and then go public, show them to the client. So go wide, you can generate a lot of ideas using divergent thinking. Go narrow, you use convergent thinking to actually whittle down the big ideas into the very best. You select using some agreed criteria, the very best, and then you go deep on those. What are the next steps? What are the dependencies? What are the risks? What approvals would we need for that? How can we test? A great question is there a cheap way to test this? This interesting idea that you come up with here, Mark. Is there a way we could test it in the marketplace, for just a few $100s, a couple of $1,000s? Is there a way we could build some? And if there is, then you bring that to the bosses and you say, look, here's a great idea, and here's a way we could develop it and test it. And we've checked with legal, and we've checked with, and we think we could. This is, and then you want a yes/no decision from the boss. Can we try this? Can we pilot it? Can we build a minimum viable product? That's how you go from crazy ideas to innovation.
How do you guide teams to choose the best unconventional idea when everything feels risky or untested?
Well, yeah, risky and untested is fine. We want that, and the boss or whoever's leading has to say risky and untested is great because that means it's new. But we can test. I mean, we're comfortable with the level of risk here. We're prepared to roll the dice a few times, and maybe we'll roll ones, but eventually we will roll a six. So let's try that. What you need to do is have some agreed criteria. You generate a lot of ideas. The criteria that I like best is we were looking for NAF ideas which are novel, attractive, and feasible. Feasible does not mean easy. Feasible means can be done, can be built with today's technologies. So it might be expensive, it might be difficult to build this, but it is feasible. It is attractive. Customers will like it. And to go back to your point, we think customers will pay for it. And it's novel, it's something new. Now, if an idea ticks those three boxes, then it tends to go through to the next stage, to the shortlist, where we then whittle it down. So novel, attractive, feasible, you go through all the ideas and you get, a dozen which tickle. And then you look at those in more detail, you whittle it down. You might end up with 3 or 4 where you go deep, you study them in more detail, and then you present those to the boss or the executive team and you say, can we go ahead? For this one, we're going to need $3,000 to build a prototype. For this one, we're going to have to go through and get approval from legal and so whatever. And you show the next steps and then you get approval.
Here's the last question. If someone wants to become personally more inventive, what daily habit do you recommend they start with immediately?
Oh, that's a great question. And the answer is get out of your rut. So we're all in a rut. I'm in a rut. You're in a rut. We do the same things over and over. We get out of bed the same side. We put the clothes on we wore the day before. We go to work the same way. Try something new every day. Go to a different art gallery. Go to a different museum. If you normally go to the jazz club, go to the bridge club. If you, I said to my wife, I said, I met a random chap at the golf club today. It was very interesting. She said, "Let me ask you, is he white?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Is he middle-aged?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Does he like golf?" I said, "Yes." She said, "He's not random. He's just like you." And she's right. So yeah, meet people who aren't like you. Meet people from a completely different. Meet young people. Meet people, immigrants. Meet people from who are Vietnamese rather than American. Meet people who are a different approach, and then chat about them, how they see the world. And if you're always reading the same newspaper, the same magazines, the same websites, you're in an echo chamber and you're not getting the creative stimulus that you need. And then the other thing to do is just to be creative. Sit down and write down ideas. So if you're a writer, write. If you're an artist, paint or draw. If you're a musician, compose. So just do the things you're supposed to do. Even if you don't have, you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, you've got start writing, start doing something. Every day get new stimulation and every day work on your project.
Paul, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And if there's other books that you've written in the past that you think would be interesting for our audience that don't quite cover the same material here, I would be interested in those, and we can have you come back.
Well, I mentioned a couple. That Lateral Thinking for Every Day is my most recent book, came out earlier this year, and
Right.
How to Be a Brilliant Thinker. I would recommend both of those.
Well, you send me an electronic version, we'll talk again.
I look forward to it, Mark.
Everyone, have a great rest of your weekend. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everybody.